principle of complementarity would not be applicable on this specific case. So we are not making a general statement about the Filipinos tribunals. We are only saying that for this specific case, at this moment, we are not seeing that there is a legal process in the Philippines about this specific individual and for this specific allegations. If they were, then his defense team or the Philippines can actually ask the court to stop this case if they can prove that there are genuine proceedings against the same person for substantially the same alleged conduct.
All right. Well, with regards to the interim release, let me just go back a bit on the legality of his arrest. Will the manner of Duterte's arrest, which his camp claims was illegal and tantamount to kidnapping, have any impact on the case he is facing, especially if he requests for an interim release?
Well, I cannot speculate on that. If there will be a request either about the lawfulness of the arrest or about an interim release, it will be for the judges to decide on it. And I don't know if the defense will do it, and I cannot speculate on what the judges will actually decide.
Under the ICC, interim release is an option for suspects, right? What are the common grounds for granting such a release? Have there been any ICC suspects in the past who were granted interim release? Were they ultimately convicted or acquitted?
Well, we need to understand that the principle is to respect the presumption of innocence. So, as a matter of principle, we consider that every suspect is innocent unless and until there is a trial after which he or she are convicted beyond any reasonable doubt. And that presumption of innocence means that the principle should be the freedom of the suspects and not their detention. When the judges issue an arrest warrant, that means that they believe that the arrest of this specific individual is necessary, either because he or she are still committing crimes, or because he or she would not appear before the court and cooperate with it if the court issued a summons to appear and not an arrest warrant, or because they believe that maybe without arresting this individual, they may be creating obstacles or threats to the proceedings, to the investigation, or to the witnesses. So they have to justify that. An interim release can be requested if there is a possibility to put in place measures and conditions to ensure that if a person is released, none of that would happen, and that this person will be brought again before the court if the judges order so. And that means that there is a different set of conditions that needs to be checked. First, in which country this person might want to be released. Does this country accept this release? If the court is ordering certain conditions and measures to be put in place to ensure that he will not be in contact with this or that he will not be threatening the investigation, that he will be brought again before the court when the judges order. Does the country accept these conditions and measures or not, and so on. So as a matter of general principle, there is all these conditions and questions need to be discussed before the judges, and then the judges will decide whether or not to grant an interim interim release with or without conditions, as I mentioned. It has happened in the past that certain persons were granted interim release or conditional release on different situations, sometimes temporarily for specific, sometimes personal conditions, and then back to the detention center. But again, it would be for the judges to decide on that if there would be a request to that effect.
So even personal reasons?
There has been short releases, for example, for private life circumstances for certain individuals in the past. We, as a matter of principle, respect this privacy, so we cannot actually discuss in details what actually happened, but that was very short moment. And again, it's the judges who decide on the interim release as a matter of principle. They decide also on the conditions and the duration of it.
And eventually after that interim release, were they convicted or acquitted?
I don't remember the full details of these different cases, but there is no link between the interim release and the final decision, because the interim release can happen at a pre-trial phase or at a trial phase. It's up to the judges to decide on it and on its conditions and on its duration. And it's not a prejudgment of whether this person will actually be acquitted or not. These are two different and separate questions.
All right. Have there been instances where the pre-trial or the trial chamber considered the actions and behaviors of, or the behavior of the suspect supporters in their decision making? In theory, how significant could this factor be in influencing the outcome of a petition, a certain petition or interim release, for example?
Now, we have to understand that the judges can only decide based on what is presented before them, either by the prosecution or by the victim's lawyers or by the defense lawyers. So they are not taking into account any other elements that are not in the files before them. So this type of actions is showing support to certain suspects, but it's not part of the findings before the judges. So it cannot be taken into account by the judges. But something that has to be also understood is that the judges, of course, do understand the how to say, the question of ensuring that a person is brought before them. And in certain instances, the question of whether this person can be kind of at large and not return before the ICC. So what kind of networks or capacity he might be able to use in order to hide can also be taken into account for the questions of interim releases and stuff like that. But it's not about the petitions or the demonstrations or stuff like that. This is, I understand, it's supporters showing their support to a certain suspect, but it's not a question that is before the judges. It's not presented to them, so it doesn't have an impact on the proceedings.
How about a certain group actually collected 64 to 65,000 signatures, of course, asking for the former president to be brought back to the Philippines and just face his trial through video link whatsoever. And this, I understand, was submitted as a petition by this particular group here at the ICC. Will there be any implication, or will it actually affect will it even reach the court if it is submitted by a civilian?
No, we need to understand that the judges, as I mentioned, can only decide based on what is presented before them by the parties and participants to the proceedings. So if there is no standing for a certain individual, meaning that they are not representing one of the parties, that they are not representing the victims, they are not admitted in a certain way to the legal proceedings, then they cannot make petitions to the judges.
All right. The possibility of securing interim release is really closely watched by the Philippines. It is closely watched in the Philippines. If ever, the ICC has signed interim release agreements with Belgium and Argentina in the past. Are these the only two options for a suspect seeking interim release? How likely or unlikely is it for a petitioner to be returned home or to their home country instead?
Again, I would not speculate on the potential outcome of a potential request.